Hi everyone, my name's Ben Hamer and I am the Future of Work lead at PwC Australia, as well as being a board member for the Australian HR Institute. And in that role, super excited to chair the Future of Work advisory panel, which brings together a whole heap of experts in the field from Australia and abroad to talk about what's happening in the market and what it means for AHRI members.
Hello, my name is Dominic Price. I'm Atlassian's Work Futurist. Atlassian, a technology company, thinking about work futurism around how we can really empower people and empower teams. And I'm super proud today to be part of this conversation and also part of the AHRI Future of Work advisory panel. The Great Resignation has been overstated, almost to the point where it's lost some of its original meaning and mojo. I think there was a great chance to have a conversation around why people were disengaged in work, why work, the structure and the nature of work wasn't right, and what we could do to improve it. And I think that's been sensationalized. I think some of the contrary data to that, if you look in the US labor markets, a lot of the sensational articles there were comparing sort of 2020 to 2021. Actually, if you went back to 2019 and you looked at the trend, it was a blip that we all expected there was going to be a drop, because in the pandemic, people were like, hey, whether I hate this job or not, I'm going to stick around, like it's an income and it's a roof over my head. And so some of what we've seen, I think, has been a catch up. What I'd love is more of a conversation around what's changed in our mindset and our expectations in what work provides to us as humans, and what does that relationship look like, and how do we make that relationship more effective? Because I think that's the conversation we should be having. And I think every time I see an article or a headline on the Great Resignation, I think it gets sensationalized, and I think we're missing the true conversation we should be having.
Yeah, look, I agree and I disagree. I agree with the whole sentiment that you were just talking about, but do I think the Great Resignation is over-dramatized? I don't. If I think about what turnover was like pre-pandemic, it was sitting at around 10.9% across all industries. And so even if we were to see that go to about 22%, that's a doubling in turnover within a 12-month period. So to me, that's something that absolutely warrants conversation and some kind of naming convention like the Great Resignation. But do I think that it's going to play out like it did in the US and the UK? And, the US are looking at having projected turnover at over 40%. It's not going to happen here. So some of that sensationalism might be playing out by drawing some of those comparators, but I do think that it's absolutely at play here in Australia. Yeah, so the Great Resignation came about, or was coined in the US, because it was in April 2021 where they had over 4 million people resign in 1 month. And then ever since then, those numbers have been increasing. But exactly in terms of Australia, I mean, we have different labour conditions. We have different experiences of COVID lockdown, which influence some of this as well. But another key differentiator in our context is border closures, both internationally and domestically, which have inhibited the supply and flow of talent. So I don't think we're going to see the same scale that we're seeing overseas in terms of turnover and resignations. But we do know that turnover in Australia is increasing. We know that there are more jobs than there were pre-pandemic, hundreds of thousands more jobs. So in November 2021, in that month alone, there were 366,000 new jobs created in Australia. And the data from Seek tells us that there are 50% more job advertisements right now than there were before the pandemic, and there are far fewer people actually applying for them. So a lot more opportunity and a lot less competition means that it's right conditions for employees to seek a new opportunity. And I think that's the thing that's really consistent with what we're seeing overseas. A lot of what's driving resignations in the US is people who are looking for better pay, better conditions, better entitlements in response to things like low wage growth, inflation, rising cost of living. Those same concerns are playing out here. And so I think we can see some of those similarities, but again, just not to the same extent and scale.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, Ben, because I think you could, we've talked about this before, right? Do we talk about the great divorce or the great marriage, right? If everyone who gets divorced gets remarried, should we talk about the remarriage and celebrate that? The fact that these people are leaving jobs, is that the news, or is it where they're going that's the news, and how we can understand what the differentiator is there? I think there's that mid ground that we've talked about before. those people who are leaving the workforce to not join another, to not go from PwC to Deloitte or vice versa, but to go and do something completely different. Right, so there's that sort of cohort that have gone, you know what, this work thing, the pandemic's taught me life's too short. This work thing's not for me. I'm going to do something completely different, markedly different, and that's a fascinating cohort that I think we should look into, because there's clearly a change in intrinsic motivation. They're not getting caught in any of this data. They're not in a workplace right now. I'm fascinated about what triggered them to go. It's not about the money, right, or the status or the role. It's about something else. So that's fascinating. I think there's then this flip side of the people that are moving is which organizations are making demonstrable changes to their work environment to attract these people. Because if we all just move around and everything else stays the same, we've jumped ship for hope of a dramatically better experience. And then you get sort of 3-6 months in, you're like, it's as crap as the last place. I'm just earning a few grand more. I'm still miserable, but I'm slightly wealthier, right? And so I think the real challenge is, how do we understand, and we've spoken before about the employee value prop, like what's in that social contract that makes that work? Because I think it's probably easy to look at a salary change because it's binary, right? It's 20 grand more or 15 grand more. You're like, cool. And it's money in your pocket. It's really hard to quantify. That's a culture or environment I think I'll thrive in. And I think really that's the thing that people want to move for, but the conversations may be stuck on the binary of dollars.
Yeah, and I think that's super interesting, because the research we did last year at the end of 2021, we found that almost 3/4 of people who had left their job in the last 12 months are looking at leaving their job again for exactly that point. They're jumping for pay because maybe they go, oh, well, if they're willing to pay me 20 grand more, it means they value my skills more. But it's not they don't get a feel for the cultural and other experiential components, which is what will actually make you stay.
Yeah. Maybe we think about people right now who are listening or watching, right, who are like, I've thought that they're in that percentage of people that Ben surveyed that have thought about leaving their job in the next 12 months, right? So they're kind of not on the fence. They've thought about it. They've not leaned in and done it, but nor are they 100% happy where they are. And my challenge to those people is, if the constraint of moving and going didn't exist, if you had to stay, what are the things you could do to make it work where you are? Now, I'm not saying stay in a bad relationship, right? If it's genuinely beyond repair and it's awful, or it's affecting your mental health, don't stay somewhere that bad, right? Life's too short, right? Move on. But you've got to think you've got a huge amount of human capital where you are. You've got a huge amount of influence, relationships, institutional knowledge, IP. I think we're actually missing a trick where we go, you know what? If I was to make this environment better, what would I do here first? And practice that. Worst case scenario, it works, right? I think the danger in this environment is that there's a little bit of expectation gap where we've become like, I expect my organization to provide all these things, and we've not yet worked out what we're giving in return, right? And I think one thing that Australia could do a lot better is tap into our mojo and go, you know what, we could be a world force. Like our workforce could be a world force here in terms of skills and attitude and mindset. How do we go about making this better ourselves and drive that change from within? And I think doing that, if you've not moved yet, go through that thought process. If you have moved, again, find a way of doing it where you are. If your onboarding experience wasn't perfect, give them feedback and then try and find ways of improving that. Because I don't think we're passengers in this. I think we need to realize we're drivers, right? We should be active in this and not let it happen to us, whether we've already left or thinking of leaving.
And Dom, there's something interesting there in terms of advice for HR leaders, because I think within your organization, there's going to be a whole bunch of people who, are going to be leaving for the same role in a different organization. And it's that cohort where you would say, well, exactly right. If you stayed, what would you do differently to make it better? But there are that group of people that you spoke about before who are going for a complete career change, or they're going out on their own or doing something completely different. And I think HR leaders still sometimes go or think about employee retention as this black and white piece, whereas I'm having conversations with them going, hey, they want to go and work for a startup. You're not a startup. You can't provide them with that opportunity. Let them go. And so it's kind of trying to just shift that mindset of how do I try and keep people to work as long as we possibly can, to support them to have these alternate and different career opportunities. How do you actually then get them to come back at some point in the future down the track? I think that overall it will slow down resignations to an extent. What we've seen in the past, and as you would expect, is amid market uncertainty, people are less inclined to take significant changes, particularly when there are financial implications. So I think there will be a degree of uncertainty and skepticism, which will see people be a little bit more reluctant to change jobs.
There's a sense I've got in the HR community, and this isn't a slant in any way, no disrespect, but it's a sense I've got, which is that there's a muscle we've had in the HR community for about 40 years, right? And that muscle is policy, right? We want something done, write a policy, write a procedure, write a policy. You can't policy your way through this, right? Because every time you write one, it's redundant, right? Or the edge case, there's too many edge cases, it doesn't work for this. And I'm desperate for the moment, and I'm seeing it in pockets where these HR people they're so smart, just step up and go, you know what? We can adapt our way through this, right? There's a level of nimbleness, and we're going to need some level of trust and some level of autonomy and flexibility in here. And we can write guardrails, but we can't do these 10 things all the time, right? Because we can't ever write the 10. So on one side, I'm desperate for the HR people to go, I know I've had an exhausting 2 years, but you know what? I'm not going to policy my way out of this. I've got a new muscle, which is guardrails and guidelines. I think as soon as we tap into that, suddenly this desire for perfection goes away. And instead we'll go, you know what? I'll take progress. I'll take progress over perfection any day. Once we accept that, I think we'll start to trend really well. So that's one thing. The scary thing though, and you mentioned it when you talk about the Great Resignation and a drop because of Omicron, and I'll just give you a personal story here, right? I've really struggled with my mojo in January, right? And the thing I'm worried about, I'm going to be fine, right? I've got ways of reigniting my mojo. I'm worried about the people in organizations who were going to resign, who have gone, can't be bothered, I'll just stay here and take a salary. They're the ones where if you're looking at stats of churn and turnover and whatever else, you're going to look at them and celebrate. And actually what you've done is you've kept a really mediocre person in a slightly warm seat. And that's the thing to worry about, because whether they go or stay, at some point we've got to have a conversation about how engaged are they? How effective are they? Are they a functional member of a team? Are they contributing, right? Are they a multiplier? We're going to have that conversation, not did they stay or go? Because staying or going is really a base level on Maslow's hierarchy of needs versus are they engaged in doing the thing I want them to do? And are they getting value from it? And am I getting value from it? And
that's a pretty interesting one though, right? Because it basically means that, you know, at the moment, the focus is all around retention, and engagement is like this nice to have thing. It's like, if I can keep them, that's the main thing. If they're happy, well, bonus.
Yeah. Whereas actually, bums on seats will never be a measure of success for any organization, right? And actually, if you look at if you strip away the BS from the thought leadership that we've both been a part of and seen in the last 2 years, if you strip away all that BS, the thing we want is humans to be more human, right? That's the thing we're deeply gunning for. But actually, a lot of the narrative is around efficiency and productivity and all this other stuff. And you're like, let's just put like that focal point of, are you effective as an employee, as a team member? Are you contributing meaningfully to our work, our customers' outcomes and all that jazz? That's gone, because everyone's about, did they stay or go? You're like, oh, they stayed. Oh, thank God for that. Not what did they do while they stayed? And so I think balancing out those narratives is going to be important to say, not just have we got the right people, but are they doing the right thing at the right time?
Yeah, so I have been known to write a couple of passive-aggressive LinkedIn comments about exactly this point of ABS data from February 2021. What that showed us in February 2021 was, for the period prior to that, so well over a year ago now, we saw a decline in job mobility and hit the lowest levels on record of people switching jobs. Now, that was in 2020 during the pandemic with no vaccine, with lockdowns. And so I think it's fairly understandable that people weren't really going to be quitting jobs in that environment. Also, if we think back to then, there were massive amounts of redundancies going on throughout organizations as well, because they weren't sure what the future looked like. So really predictable in terms of people not wanting to change jobs. To say that, and this is what some commentators in the market have then said, use that metric of over a year ago to say the Great Resignation is not playing out because look, the ABS has said. So that's apples and oranges. What we do know from the data that's a proxy for job mobility, because The ABS hasn't yet released the next iteration, which will come out around the same time as this video, is that the number of job vacancies is increasing, turnover is increasing as reported by Australian organisations, and the number of jobs has increased with less competition. So I think it's pretty clear to say that the Great Resignation is happening. I think the data from February 2021 of record low mobility is the calm before the storm, which means the impact of people resigning en masse will be more intense and more acutely felt by organisations. And if I think about it in terms of a plane, the plane has taken off. Has it reached its peak altitude? No. Do we know when it will? We were thinking March 22, but I think Omicron might then extend that out a little bit. But it's definitely that the peak has yet to come as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, just to echo that, I mean, mobility will increase because supply and demand tells us it will. There is demand for roles. People are being way more aggressive with how they think about hiring. You go to LinkedIn anytime in the last 30 odd days in January, every single day. And my company's hiring, and here's the perks, and here's the deals. Like, everyone's at it for a small talent pool. And if I just give you some numbers as an example, right? Just like Atlassian's been on epic growth trajectory for our 20 years of existence, but we doubled in size, right, in the 2 years of the pandemic, and we're planning to triple as quickly as we can, right? So if you want to understand what aggressive looks like, that is us saying we're no longer just hiring in Sydney or commutable distance to Sydney. We're hiring anywhere. Here's the flexibility we're giving you. Here's like you can't get much more open to bringing workforce in, right? You can't meet anyone much further than halfway and make this a functional relationship. And so you'll see organizations doing that. That means that anyone who's slightly tempted, those opportunities are there, right? So I can't think of a better set of conditions for job mobility than right now. There's two causes and effects that we're muddying together here, right? There's the time lag of people got more conservative during the height of the pandemic and lockdowns because there's a huge amount of uncertainty, and science shows when we're uncertain, we bunker down. That time lag is now gone, and we'll see that follow through. It would be easy to blame that time lag on all the data right now, dead easy, and we'd be kidding ourselves. Because at the same time, we've all gone through an absolutely awful experience. And that experience has made us go, what do I want from life? Is it family, right? Is it friends? Is it society? Do I want a role that's satisfied? Do I want bigger dollars? Like, what is life to me, and what does that mean? And I think if we underbake that, that's the bit where we go, what are people's intrinsic motivation? Why do we work, and how do we want to work? If we don't understand that, and we just think this is a flush through of stats, we're missing an amazing opportunity to change the way we work. And that's why I fear some of the melodrama around the Great Resignation and the stats on it missed, because it ends up being the argument on those ABS stats, which is irrelevant. You go, you know what? People are moving. Should we find out why? And should we find out where they're going? And should we find out what we can do to make that better? If it's within our control, they're all great conversations that we can impact. And I think there's quite a few people either hiding behind the stats or using the stats incorrectly.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's also people are playing catch up to an extent. I mean, the stuff around wanting to essentially get a pay rise because we've had low wage growth, et cetera, and now's the conditions with which you can be a bit more aggressive about getting that, sure. But I don't think that means it's a small reshuffle. I think going back to my earlier point, even if turnover hit 22%, which given that 38% of Australians are thinking about changing jobs, 22% is doubling. That is significant. And I think, I've seen so many variations of the Great Resignation. I don't care what we call it, but I think if people try and give it a name that makes it seem like a small reshuffle, it's not going to be that significant, it's not really going to have an impact, that's just naive and that's lazy, because then it means that you don't have an obligation to do something about it because it's only going to be this small blip on the radar. So
you have to know what your employee value proposition is. And by that, I don't mean just how you hire and onboard. I mean, how you think about your entire employee experience and get that social contract, that win where they benefit and learn and grow and you benefit, learn and grow. I think that's something, if you've not got that, or if it's vague or not a shared understanding on it, then it's not effective and real. And then the second thing is use data and insights, right? But mix the hard data with some of the insights to go, here's some of the trending we're seeing. What can we learn from our current people? What can we learn from the people that have stayed? What can we learn from the people that are leaving? What can we learn from the people that we're trying to attract, the candidates we're trying to attract that maybe don't join us? Like, I think we're so flush and rich with data, but we've not yet worked out how to turn it into an insight to change our behavior. And so for any leader out there, I think you can put a simple program together to actually just learn more. And the quicker you learn, which involves opening these big floppy things on the side of your head, and you absorb that, then you can make the necessary change to improve. I think to Ben's point before, there's a lot of people who are using the data to oh, look, there's a squirrel, and distract people without going, maybe as an organization, we can do this better. And I think as leaders, we need to take some ownership that a lot of this is on us.
Yeah, so I totally agree. It's around the EVP and reimagining the EVP. The interesting thing is, so that research we did at the end of last year, 49% of top executives in Australia said that they have no plans whatsoever to look at their EVP. So that's that cohort of lazy and naive executives who have their heads in the sand. You need to be doing something about it. And I think the two things I'd add to what Dom said about, how you go about looking at your EVP, one is to look at non-traditional competitors, because you have your Atlassians who may not have been a competitor in the past, but hey, you can work from anywhere and they're a competitor now. And it's not just around people who are in your industry, but if you're looking for people with tech skills, guess what? So are a lot of other organizations. And then the other thing as well is to not just think about how do I keep people for as long as possible, or how do I mitigate the turnover impact? How do you actually position yourselves, knowing that other people are going to be on the move, to be an employer of choice so that those people in the market want to come and work for you?